Hi everybody, I'm Mike with SuccessToolChest.com and FindAMentor.com. Welcome to this week's Help Me Communicate, where I help you be a better communicator. Today, I'm going to talk about 8 words and phrases to avoid so that you can keep people engaged and keep people enthusiastic about moving forward in a conversation. Do you struggle with what words to choose in a difficult situation? Or have you noticed that some people kind of turn off or get defensive when you say direct things to them? Could you be gentler when you're being direct? When you're coaching someone to correct a behavior or a mistake, do they get defensive? You're probably using defensive, provoking words. And there's 8 that I'm going to share with you today that you can avoid. And it'll allow you to be a more gentle and engaging communicator. Using soft word choice keeps people open instead of defensive. They help you, when you use these softer words that I'm going to share with you today in replacement, they help you be a better leader and a better coach. Often we have to deal with difficult situations or correct people in behaviors or mistakes, and at the same time, we want to be gentle and we want to keep them in a positive process and keep them moving forward. And so these 8 words that I'm going to share with you, or 8 words and phrases that I'm going to share with you today, do the exact opposite of that most of the time. These 8 words will keep people turned off, or invoke guilt, or get them on the defensive. And so the first word I want you to avoid is the word always. And I want you to avoid the word always most of the time. The words to replace always with are most, or often, or usually. And it's a little bit of a contradictory one, this one, replacing the word, never using the word always. If I say you always avoid the word always, that's contradictory. So you mostly avoid the word always. And I'll tell you why. If I say to somebody, you always, for example, a child, if I say to my child, you always leave your shoes at the door and don't put them away. And in fact, that person or that child does put their shoes away 1 out of every 5 times. When I use the word always, I'm actually lying to them. And the first thing they think about when I say that you always leave your shoes there is that, no, I didn't leave my shoes there last Friday. So it decreases the respect that they have for me. It puts them on the defensive, and it puts a wedge in the relationship or the conversation. And so if I say you mostly or you rarely put away your shoes instead of you always leave them there, it's more accurate. Another example, I was doing a workshop on communications, and I was working with some equipment people, and we were talking about avoiding the word always. And one of the guys spoke up quite quickly, and he says, well, Mike, if I say to somebody, you should most often put diesel in a diesel engine, instead of you should always put diesel in a diesel engine. That's not the right way to speak that situation. You always need to put diesel in a diesel engine and gas in a gas engine. And it made me think of a time when I was a young teenager working on a construction site, and I was assigned the task of working on a bobcat and cleaning out a basement. It was a 100-year-old building, and we were digging the basement out to make higher ceilings. And so it was a tiny little bobcat, and at the end of the day, I fueled it up with the wrong fuel. And the next day I came into the site, and they had given somebody else heck for putting the wrong fuel in the bobcat, and the engine blew up. And I didn't say anything. It was me that did it. I felt a little bit embarrassed, but I didn't want to lose my job. But it was a perfect example. You never, or you always put diesel in a diesel engine. And so there are times where the word always is appropriate to use, but it's rare, to be honest with you. There's only a few circumstances. And if we want to be a gentle, engaging communicator, it's best to avoid that word always and use most, or often, or usually, and those type of things. The next word that I want to talk about, and this is a really important word to keep in mind, because the word should, I want you to avoid using the word should most of the time. And I'll tell you why. The word should is a guilt motivator. Now, we use the word should with ourselves often, and we use it with other people often. You should do it this way, or you should do it that way. Or in talking to myself, oh, I should have done this, or I should have done that. And what happens when we use that word should, is we invoke guilt. And as a leader, when we're trying to guide somebody towards a positive process, we want to avoid invoking negative emotion most of the time. There are times where it's important that we correct people, and I'm going to give you a tip at the end of this session for how to correct people, and in the case you may use the word should all the time, like back to that fuel example. You should put diesel in a diesel engine. That might be the appropriate word, use of the word should. Having said that, the word to replace should with is could. And why do we want to use the word could? Could is a much more gentle word. It keeps people engaged. And the biggest thing about the word could is it allows people the ability to use our greatest gift. And what's our greatest gift as humans? Our greatest gift from God is our ability to exercise what we have is the power of choice. The power of choice is one of our greatest gifts. And when I'm using the word could, it honors each individual's power to choose. So when I'm giving people a suggestion on how to do something, and I use the word could, and in using that word, I might want to state consequences of doing something this way or that way. You could do it this way, and here's what the consequences will likely be. Or you could do it this way, and here's what the consequences would likely be. Having said that, when we use the word could, it keeps those options open, and it's much more gentle. The same thing in our self-talk. When I say to myself, oh, I should have done that yesterday, better for me to keep myself in a more positive frame of mind to say, I could have done that this way yesterday. And that keeps me from beating myself up a little bit. Have you ever heard the phrase that if we talk to our friends the way that we talk to ourselves, we wouldn't have any friends? One of the ways that we talk to ourselves that would keep people away from us is by using the word should often. I first learned about the word should taking a communications and leadership course in my 20s. And one of the ways that they put that, the reasons to avoid the word should is because it keeps us stuck in old ways. As we grow up as children, we develop beliefs and values from our families, from our friends, from our schools, from all of those things. And so we get a whole bunch of shoulds on how we should do specific things in specific categories. And I think it's very important, and we were taught that it's very important to question those shoulds that are in our beliefs and values systems, because those shoulds can keep us stuck in old ways that aren't necessarily healthy. The world evolves, people evolve, and we find new ways of doing things that are better than the old ways of doing things. So I always question those deep values and beliefs, shoulds, and make sure that they still fit for who we are. And sometimes our shoulds hold us back from being all that we could be. So watch how you use that word should, not only in communicating with other people, but in communicating with yourself and your self-talk. The word should be questioned in every phrase that it's used. Now, it is appropriate to use it. Sometimes I notice that many coaches and motivational speakers will use the word should to keep people, because they really want to emphasize that this is probably the best way to do something for most people. So they will use the word should, and there are times where that's appropriate. Having said that, people are creatures of habit. And so if I'm in the habit of using the word could, then when that circumstance comes up where I need to change that word, I can do that quickly in a conversation and change it back. Well, you could do it this way, but really you should do it this way because this is the consequence. And I really want to emphasize that this is the best thing. So you should avoid using the word should most of the time. would be an example of how to use this in a coaching format, this word should. But I am in the habit of using the word could, and it keeps people engaged, and it keeps people more positive, and it allows them to exercise their power to choose. It also gets them thinking on their own and finding solutions within themselves, rather than me coming up with all the solutions when I'm coaching somebody. So the word could is a great replacement to the word should, and I think it's important to make using the word could versus should a habit in your daily communications, and you will find that people will stay more engaged in those crucial conversations if you're avoiding that word should. The next two phrases that I want to talk about, so we've gone through always and should to avoid those, these are comparable to the word should, but they're common phrases, is you need to and you have to. That's phrases 3 and 4 to avoid. You need to and you have to. When I say to somebody, you need to do something this way, it puts them on the defensive often, especially if I use a harsher tone or a higher tone. We don't want to put people in negative states of being when we're communicating difficult situations and circumstances. So the thing to replace need to and have to, those two phrases with, use the word could as an option, and the other thing to replace them with is to actually put them in a question. So do you think you need to do this, or do you think you have to do this? By putting need to and have to in a question, it allows people to exercise their option or their power to choose, and it's a gentler way to communicate. It also, when you're putting those phrases in a question, it allows people the opportunity to dig inside themselves and find solutions on their own. So if you want to use the words need to, or the phrases need to and have to, put it in a question. And if you can't put it in a question, replace it with the word could. And when sharing that could, remember there's times where it's appropriate to share the consequences of each could that you're sharing. So avoid need to and have to. And remember that people don't always think the same as us. And so if I say to somebody, you need to do it this way, and in their mind, they've got it going that they don't really need to do it this way, that they could do it this way, and it will work just as well, then all I'm doing, again, is I'm putting that wedge in. And so if I'm avoiding these negative and emotionally evoking phrases and words, if I'm avoiding them, I'm avoiding that wedge in the relationship and in the interaction. So replace need to and have to either with questions or with the word could. The next words, actually the next 4 words go together, but the next word I'm going to talk about is the word never. Replace the word never with rarely. Again, absolute words like never and always. You never get to work on time. When in fact, if I say that to somebody that I'm coaching, the reality is sometimes they get to work on time. And so again, I'm reducing my credibility because I'm actually lying. If I say you never get to work on time and they get to work on time 1 out of 5 times, I'm actually lying. And what the person's natural reaction to do is to remember a time when they actually got to work on time. So they discredit my leadership, they discredit my integrity, they discredit my honesty if I'm using these absolute words. And I don't want to discredit myself when I'm coaching somebody. I want people to respect me. I want them to engage in the conversation. And so avoid the word never, and use the word rarely instead. The next word is everyone that I want you to avoid. Again, it's an absolute word. Everyone thinks like this, you're crazy. It's not a good way to keep people engaged or keep them in a positive, progressive state of being. The reality is there's 7 billion humans on the planet. There's 7 billion different DNAs. There's also 7 billion different human interaction processes. Each person communicates and reacts in their own specific way. The human interaction process, the HIP, is how people communicate. We sense, we think, we feel, we intend, and then we act. It's how we interact with other people. And if I say, everyone thinks like me, and you're really weird, the reality is that is a lying statement. Again, I would reduce my credibility. I reduce the respect that people will feel for me, because the reality is most of us have people in our lives that think and feel the same or similar to us in similar circumstances and situations. So if I say everyone thinks like this, the reality is they probably know somebody that thinks like they do. And so again, my credibility goes out the window, and the respect that I'm trying to, that I want the other person to build in themselves for me goes out the window. So if I say most people instead of everyone, most or many people, or the majority of people think like this, or all the people I know think like this, that maintains my credibility. It maintains my integrity. It maintains authenticity and realism. And it's important to maintain that if I want my relationship with anybody, whether it's a coworker or somebody that I'm coaching or leading, or a friend or a family member. It's important that we maintain that respect and that integrity. And avoiding the word everyone helps us maintain that. The next word is all, and it fits right into that everyone thing. The same rules apply. All people do this, or all people think like this. Use the same rules as everyone. Most, many, the majority of, those kind of things. The last word is no one. Replace that word with few, very few, or some. And the same rules applies to the word everyone. If I say nobody's like this, that's a lie. Because that person is, for one. So that immediately makes that statement out the window and no credibility. So avoid, here's your 8 words: no one, all, everyone, never, have to, need to, should, and always. And use gentler, more engaging words: could, few, many, most, rarely, often, sometimes, most of the time, that type of stuff. And if you get in the habit, and remember, people are creatures of habit. How we communicate, the words we choose, are habitual. And so if I am habitually using should and have to and need to and everyone and no one and all and those kind of words, or never or always, then I'm going to often invoke negative responses. If I use the gentle words, I'll keep things more positive. And now there are times where, like I said, we have to use these words. When I say avoid these words, I want you to mostly avoid these words and be very selective when you use these particular words, and develop the habits of using the replacements. And don't hesitate to change a word in the middle of a conversation. So if I'm talking to somebody and I say, well, you should be doing this, I'll back up and say, well, actually, you could do it this way. And even correcting myself in the middle of a conversation shows integrity. People's respect for me grows because, and half the time people don't even notice that I've taken a word out and replaced it with another word. It just flows into the conversation. So don't hesitate to change and correct yourself in the middle of a conversation. That's one tip. The second tip I want to give you today about how to help people move along, to coach and to lead your teams, is to use, and I've talked about this before, the shit sandwich method when you're giving constructive criticism or correcting a behavior or a mistake that someone have. Like I said, we want to keep people's energy positive. And so the way to do that is when you have to correct somebody, to use that shit sandwich method. So Charlie, you do really good work, and the quality of your work is impeccable. We're really, really happy with that. But you have a hard time getting to work on time. And what happens when we allow you to get to work late every day, other people notice that. And so they wonder, why do I have to get here on time? And so soon we have half our staff coming in late. And that reduces the productivity of the organization and the profitability of the company. So now we really want you to, and all of our staff, to get here on time. And if that doesn't happen, we're going to have to make an adjustment. Having said that, Like I mentioned earlier, the quality of your work is impeccable. You also are, you're really good with all your coworkers. You get along really well with everybody. So there's lots of positive things that you do well. We just want you to fix this one little thing. And did you notice that I gave them positives, then I corrected them, then I gave them, repeated the positive that I gave them first and give them an extra positive affirmation. And that keeps people in that positive format. And so when you're correcting somebody, like if I was correcting somebody for putting diesel in a gas engine, I would say you need to really be attentive to give them the positive stuff first, and I would say you really need to be attentive to what you're doing when you're maintaining our equipment, and then I would give them another positive. So there are times where the need tos, the always, the shoulds, and those kind of things are appropriate, but it's rare. And so keep that in mind. The other tip that I want to give you, the third tip today, is just to remember to ask lots of questions. Get people thinking on their own. If you're leading people, a good communicator asks lots of questions. They engage other people by asking what's going on for them. So if I've just done a corrective conversation with somebody and I've given them a shit sandwich, the way I want to finish that, or the next step in that conversation, is to ask them, okay, so now that you've heard me say those words, what are your thoughts? What did you hear me say? Let's get clear on that. How do you feel about that? What do you want to come out of this? And again, my questions are all related to their human interaction process. When you heard me say this, what did you hear? What words did you hear? So I'll clarify it to make sure that they heard what I was wanting to say. And then I'll say, so what did you think about that? What are your opinions? Or how did you feel? How did it make you feel? And I'd get the feeling out. And then what do you want to come out of it? So I'm exploring their human interaction process in my questioning. So there's your tips. Avoid always, should, need to, have to, never, everyone, all, and no one. Ask lots of questions. Remember to do your feedback and ship sandwiches. That's today's Help Me Communicate lessons. I hope you got something out of that. I hope you enjoyed today. Remember to share this video or this Help Me Communicate video series with your friends. Anybody that's having a struggle with communicating, we've got all these weekly videos that are all posted at the successtoolchest.com blog. Like our page here on Facebook. Download the free HIP effective awareness communications tool, so you understand how people communicate and how to explore that human interaction process. That's all free. Remember that we have the Contact Communications and Masterminding online program, and when you sign up for that program, it's only $199. When you sign up for that program, you get access to me on a weekly basis to help you as those difficult and crucial conversations come up throughout the year. It's a great value. Your personal development is important. As humans that want to be successful, they're constantly improving on their personal development and their abilities and their skills. And how do we communicate is one of the most important skills that you can develop in your success tool chest arsenal. So take the Contact Communications and Mastermind course, work on becoming a better communicator all the time, and like our page here, share it with your friends, go out and make it an awesome day, and have a great week. We'll see you next Wednesday for Help Me Communicate. Bye for now.